Just a moment.
When Night Dive Studios isn't busy gassing up Atari, who I keep forgetting still exists sort of, they're really high on one of their latest releases, a remake of System Shock, which I also forgot existed until I got my backer key for it. Quick disclaimer, I've played the second System Shock, but not the first one, so I'm not going into this with anything resembling a purist attitude. Also, I had to run the game on the lowest settings, or else my recording software would do to the frame rate what the mutants did to the ship's crew. Just think of it as retrovision. You're a hacker who gets caught trying to acquire information about a high-tech neural implant from a company named Trioptimum. You're then taken to the Citadel, a massive space station, where Edward Diego, a Trioptimum executive, offers said implant and the surgery for free if you hack into the Citadel Station's AI, Shodan, and remove all the ethical restraints which apparently hold her full potential back. Upon doing so, you're put to sleep and wake up several months later in a medical bay with the neural implant installed. However, there's a biological outbreak, a huge mining laser is charging so it can fire at Earth, and Shodan is,
with cameras as my eyes and nodes as my hands, I rule here. Insect. Their rotting corpses will provide the food for my world to grow and prosper.
Let's just say Shodan's a bit cranky. The plan is to stop the laser from firing, evade Shodan while stopping its other plans, and get off the station. If you're nice about it, this counterterrorism consultant will make sure people don't know that you're the one who kinda sorta helped cause all this death and destruction. If you haven't played System Shock 1 or 2, based on how this remake seems to be by and large faithful to the original, let's put it this way. The things you liked about BioShock, you know, the spiritual successor to the System Shock games, most of them came from System Shock 1 or 2. From the audio log system, to some of the hacking games, to the surgical chambers that act as respawn points, to creating atmosphere through the enemy's speech.
I hear. I obey. It's not like everything. Just know it. Terrible lives. What was that?
But this System Shock maintains some things from the original that make it not as easy as BioShock was. You still have to manage your inventory space, you can't hack your way into certain areas right away, the weapons some enemies drop are almost always broken, so you can't equip them, enemies reappear in areas you've already cleared out, ammo can be scarce at times, and depending on what difficulty you pick, there's a ticking clock element. Oh yeah, that's another thing they kept from the original. The ability to select different difficulties for the 4 main aspects of the game. Again, as someone who only watched part of a long play of the first System Shock, the remake seems to retain the bulk of the elements of the original, add some modern gameplay elements for minor convenience and playability, and incorporate a few elements from System Shock 2, such as destroying cameras to lower Shodan's security for each level, looting absolutely everything just in case there's something useful you might miss, recycling objects to get extra money, which you can then dump into various vending machines, tiptoeing around or through biohazards, picking up various neural rig upgrades, and an easier to understand version of the cyberspace mechanic. I realize I've spent pretty much all of this video just explaining the game, but that's because in terms of critique, the System Shock remake does most things very well. It controls smoothly, it builds and transitions well between atmospheres, such as how the music picks up in an enemy encounter and dies down afterward. And despite having several different mechanics and forms of gameplay involved, it all comes together to form a cohesive experience where everything fits with everything. The bulk of the game plays like a first-person shooter, but even though things like the cyberspace mechanic or the hacking puzzles are far different gameplay-wise, they all make sense in the game's context and don't distract from each other. With all that in mind, there are still a few rough edges to the remake, some of which will more than likely be addressed by the time this video is out. For one thing, the achievements were broken on launch, but not in the way you'd expect. I somehow doubt that a few days after release, I was one of only 0.6% of players to leave the first few rooms of the game. The AI can be, in a word, questionable at times, particularly for enemies that are spawned in later. The remake does include in-game explanations for various items or controls, but ignores others. It explains what a junction box is, but doesn't explain the objective or function of the puzzle in the junction box. The first time I went into cyberspace, there was no explanation for anything. Granted, I grew up playing 6 Degree of Freedom games like Descent, Fury 3, and Forsaken, so I knew what to do almost instinctively. Players who don't have that experience, though? They're going to be in for a dizzying, hope you don't get motion sick easily time. While we're in cyberspace, I should mention that my game soft-locked in one of these sequences. I opened up a barrier, went into the next room, backed up while shooting down some enemies, and the barrier closed in front of me. The switch that opened the barrier was gone. The recall escape tool, which is supposed to help get out of these sequences, didn't work, and I had to start the entire sequence over. Actually, I had to redo part of the normal level as well, because this game's autosaves are really far apart. It didn't take long before I started manually saving on a new file every 5 minutes or so. Even though I praised the controls earlier, there's still one really annoying problem with them. Sometimes the game couldn't handle me trying to move and shoot at the same time. I would move, press shoot, and nothing would happen. This wasn't ammo or fatigue related, my weapon just wouldn't fire. These are the kind of things that will more than likely be addressed in a patch after release. In fact, as of my writing this, the Kickstarter page lists things included in the next update. And most of my issues aren't listed. Great. Even with these issues, I'm still having fun with the System Shock remake. I don't know if I'd shell out the $40 asking price right away though. If you're not going to wait for a sale, at least wait for a patch or two to help stabilize certain parts of the game and get rid of a few bugs. You think you can handle that, Shodan?
I will cleanse them from my body soon.